Hey guys, Ryan and Greg here, back with another breakdown for American Horror Story Freak Show. Greg, is that a dinosaur onesie?
Yes, it is, and I am sweating in this thing.
I love your commitment to these breakdowns, and I promise you, next week I will be wearing a onesie as well, okay? Right now, let's break down episode 7 of Freak Show. It's called Test of Strength, and there are a ton of spoilers, guys, so make sure you've seen the episode, then come on right back here.
Okay, so this episode kicks off right where we left off at Mott Manor, where Jimmy comes by to check on the twins. He's concerned.
That's an understatement of the year, right? Because we don't know who Dandy is. No one really knows that he's the killer yet, but they know that Dandy's kind of a bit out there, right?
Yes.
And when we get to the Mott Mansion, we find out that Bette Dot, obviously, they have different feelings about their experience there, their time there. You know, Bette
wants to stay.
She loves it. Bette wants to stay. She's hanging out, she's eating caviar. I mean, she got used to it, right? Whereas Dot is just like, she's super cautious, doesn't really know what's going on, doesn't know who to trust. But then we find out that Dandy broke their trust, right, by looking into the journal, their diary. And that's a big no-no, Greg.
That's strike 1, 2, and 3, and Bette is ride or die with her sister at this point. So she even tells him, listen, you can keep the caviar. I'm gonna head out with my sister. And Dandy is not happy.
I'm working on dying.
I'm upset.
Now, back at the Freak Show, we get a rehearsal from Jimmy, who we haven't seen on stage yet doing his own little thing. He has his own little song. It's, of course, Nirvana, Come As You Are. And it's perfectly fit. Although Elsa's not a fan of the performance, I don't know what's wrong with Elsa. I enjoyed it. It's perfectly fitting for Jimmy and like what he's been through this season.
Absolutely, and he tells Elsa straight up, he's not changing a damn thing about the song whatsoever. Now, the Nirvana references run deep with this show, especially when it comes to Evan Peters, because in his AHS debut on Murder House, he even wore a similar outfit that Cobain had on in Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit music video.
Yeah, it's a fun nod to Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. Obviously, Evan Peters, kind of even his hairstyle in certain seasons has kind of been similar to that of Kurt Cobain as well. And Ryan Murphy, when he talked about some of the musical choices they made in Freak Show, he spoke with Entertainment Weekly, and he said, quote, "We decided we only were going to highlight musical artists who at some point in their career had identified themselves as feeling like freaks or misfits or outcasts, which our people are going through." So it's pretty perfect when you think about what choices they made in terms of musical performances and the characters that are performing them within this season.
Truthfully, adequate.
I'm not changing anything. That's the song. That's how I'm doing it. Tonight, mid-show number.
Side note, during this performance, Paul's still in really bad shape and Penny's nursing him back to health.
Poor Paul.
Now, at the end of the performance, Elsa and Jimmy spar for just a moment, but Jimmy has the upper hand, at least he thinks at the moment, because he has the twins that he pulls out from the back like Madison Montgomery to reveal themselves. And sure enough, he thinks, this is it, I got her. But nope, the twins have their own plans in mind.
That's not quite how it happened, actually.
What are you doing? Keep it buttoned. I know what I'm doing.
What a surprising little plot twist here, because you think that Elsa is backed up into a corner and that there's no way she gets out of this. I mean, she's basically going to get scolded and called out in front of the entire Freak Show, right? But the twins lie, and they say that that's not the truth, that they came and went under their own power, that Elsa was doing them a service, that helping them out to give them kind of a better life or more opportunity, but that they chose to come back. So this was a bit of a curveball and unexpected, knowing what we know about Elsa and the twins. And the big key here is that the twins hold a whole lot of power and leverage over Elsa at this part. You know, the only reason why they're doing this is because they want to be the main draw. Yeah, they want the profit. They want to see success, and they see that they can kind of use this knowledge against Elsa and kind of get whatever they want. And it turns out to having a bigger stake in the box office draw. They also, I think at some point in the back of their heads, at least when it's concerned with Dot, she knew that like living at Mott Mansion probably wasn't the best thing for their safety and well-being.
Meanwhile, Dell's back at the gay bar High Noon, and he's spotted by Stanley. He's looking for Andy. He can't find him. Obviously, Andy's dead. But the thing we get out of this whole exchange is that Stanley spotted him.
And Stanley's definitely going to use this knowledge against Dell, because Dell hasn't come out,
yeah.
right? He's not comfortable in his own skin. He hasn't really. This is kind of like his dark secret. He doesn't want to share with anybody, and he's ashamed by himself, and he doesn't want anyone to know about this. And Stanley's like, "Oh, I'm going to take advantage of this, and I'm going to basically get whatever I want out of you." Now we know that means bad things for the other freaks at the campground.
Now, there's a quick scene where Desiree and Ethel go back to see the doctor from last week's episode, and he turns out that he is no longer with us. His daughter's there, and she tells them that his hands were crushed and that he shot himself afterwards.
Greg, it's impossible to shoot yourself if your hands are completely crushed.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that, right?
So did Dell kill him as well, or was it just the hands? I don't know.
I don't know. What we do know is Dell is a horrible human being. I mean, to crush the man's hands when he was just trying to help a woman with a procedure. Dell's obviously extremely possessive and just crazy. But yeah, what a horrible thing that this poor guy ended up dying because of those actions of Dell.
I know this place a couple of towns over called High Noon. What? Oh. You haven't heard of it?
Now let's talk about Stanley and Maggie again. Obviously, they are evil people. Stanley a little bit more than Maggie, but they're both bad. We see Dell kind of be approached by Stanley quite a bit this episode and kind of just taunted at, and just kind of forced into his plan. And specifically, one moment is during the Test Your Strength game. Now, obviously, the episode's title is Test of Strength. Obviously an allusion to the game that is played at the carnival itself. But also, it's a physical thing, right? And throughout this episode, we see Dell literally testing his strength and hurting those around him. He's a weapon to be used against others. But also, I feel like it's Stanley and how he's manipulating those around him to get what he wants.
Yeah, from the beginning to the end of this episode, it really was Stanley using whatever he could, his words, to take care of things. His strength is his voice.
Exactly.
It's not his muscles.
Right. So it's kind of cool to see that, though, to see one character it's the physical manifestation of strength. Although we know that he's very weak inside, and it's kind of just like an outward projection of that strength. Whereas Stanley's strength comes in his communication,
words,
and his manipulation tactics to use anything he can, any dirt as bad as it is, as dishonest as it is, he'll use it against you. So it is a literal test of strength amongst various characters in this episode.
Now, back to Maggie for a minute. She's kind of tiptoeing back and forth between good and evil because she's obviously in on the entire plot. She knows everything that's happening with Dell right now. She's the witness in the background for one scene. And then later on, we see another scene where she's talking to Jimmy about trying to get out of town again. So she knows she knows everything that's happening here in the park, and she's trying to get out as soon as possible before bodies start dropping. Unfortunately, she's not doing a good job at that because Jimmy wants to stick around also to take care of the twins, and he's worried about just the freak show itself at this moment in Dandy.
Yeah, and I must say, like, I do feel that Maggie is genuine about her time when she spends with Jimmy. But she's also, we have to remember, she's also like a bit of an actress and obviously a con artist. So obviously we know the history off screen between Emma Roberts and Evan Peters, and it seems like a very genuine, intimate moment between these two characters in the show itself. But in the back of our heads, we're also wondering, like, how evil could she be? Is she definitely like, she's a Stanley in training, but she's not definitely, she could be swayed back to the good side. Obviously she's like in between the dark side and the light side. So it's like,
yeah,
she very you said it nicely. She kind of tiptoes on both sides of that various times throughout the season.
So the overall plan here is that Stanley wants to use Dell's strength to get one of the freaks for sale. He's going to sell one of the bodies, or I'm assuming maybe alive if he can get him alive, but he just wants one of the freaks, and he's going to use Dell's strength to get it.
Now, Greg, you and I, we're good people. We would never hurt another human being. But if you were Dell, why would you go after the strongest person, one of the strongest persons besides yourself in the campground? He goes after Amazon Eve. At nighttime, he thinks that he can kind of put her away, beat her up, and bring her to Stanley. And this does not go well.
Nope.
What ensued was one of the most spectacular ass whoopings ever witnessed in the Atlantic Northeast. Viewer discretion is advised.
Who's the strong man now?
So Dell gets his ass kicked, and from there, Eve goes straight up to Ethel and Elsa to tell her what happened. And then I think Jimmy's there as well, and Ethel comes up with a plan. You know what? Let's just handle this ourselves. We won't call the police or anything. We'll kill him. And Jimmy's just like, whoa. Let's calm down a bit here. Let's figure out what happened.
This was a strange little interaction because Jimmy is like pro call the cops, which he hasn't been all season long, right? He wants to involve the cops and he wants to do the right thing, so it's kind of strange. Whereas Ethel gives like a very touching kind of speech about there's going to be like two different groups of people, right? People who take advantage and hurt the ones that are kind of vulnerable. And she's seen for a long time throughout her life that Dell is the type of person that's always going to do harm to others in order for his own personal gain. And she basically wants to get some revenge and some vengeance on this person, on anyone that does that, and believes that that's okay to do. So she wants to take justice into her own hands.
Yeah, and she knows more than Jimmy does about Dell and the fact that, she wants her revenge for trying to kill Jimmy. So this is it. Now, this leads to Dell and Jimmy going out for drinks, but Dell, the only thing he's thinking of at this moment is Jimmy's hands. He's trying to figure out how does he get these hands. So he proceeds to get Jimmy skunk drunk.
Just when you thought it was a touching father-son bonding trip at the bar, Greg, you know that there's ulterior motives underneath why Dell is acting a certain way. But ultimately, it is a nice little scene here because you find out that Dell can't go through with it, that he can't hurt his son, that he can't... He couldn't live with himself if he did that. And, even the predicament he's in with Stanley... He's not about to kill someone that close to him in order to get Stanley what he wants.
Now, the big reason why he doesn't kill him is because Jimmy reveals that he knows everything. He knows that he's his father. And so this leads to this weird fatherly son bonding moment where they just stay out all night and drink and then wind up back at the carnival with Desiree and Elsa looking on in just disgust of what they're looking at. They're just miserable, drunken messes at this point.
Shh, quiet, Elsa. Shh, wake everybody up. I don't want to wake anybody. Shh. Quiet!
And like we said, Stanley is there throughout the episode to kind of taunt Dell and motivate him to actually get the job done. So basically, Dell's kind of going through a list of like targets or potential victims that he might get for Stanley, and then he has to the growing list is getting shorter and shorter because all these other things pop up, like he can't physically take out Amazon Eve and Jimmy, there's a heart-to-heart with him and his son. If you hadn't watched this episode before, you're like, who is next? Who's the target?
He starts off with the biggest, strongest, and where does it lead him? To the smallest one there. All right. Hey, I hate it, but you gotta love the script here. I thought it was pretty damn good.
All right, let's talk about Penny, who has decided to leave her home and wants to go live with Paul at the campground. But we knew that Penny's dad,
all good.
Penny's dad, Vince, is not going to have it. He does not like it.
Nope. And he's not a fan of this. It's okay.
He confronts her. He confronts her over it, and he, I don't even know. He punishes her with a tattoo artist. This is just horrible, Greg.
What a bizarre scene. It's very campy for a point. It's also disturbing, but I can't get over this. If you watch this live, you're thinking, you didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming at all, where they were going with this. I thought, okay, the dad's going to do something to her, but I don't know where they're going with it. So they tattoo her face as a reptile, and they also, they give her a forked tongue. Cool. I started laughing. I'm sorry. I know it's horrible, but I couldn't stop laughing at this scene. Just the idea that you would think that even write this down, like, all right, what do we do with Penny's character now? Okay, so she's going to go home to her dad. Her dad's not going to dig anything she's saying about leaving to go live at the, freak show or to be with anyone that she loves who works at the carnival. So he decides to turn her into a freak himself. Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is some metal stuff.
We did not see that coming at all. And to be honest, Vince, as a character, one of the most evil villains of this season or of American Horror Story.
Evil.
He's not in a ton of episodes or scenes, but when he is on screen, it's very, very convincing.
A man like me is dead if it doesn't come with a sterling reputation. You are my blood. But if you do something to shame me, to shame this family, I will do whatever it takes to make sure no one ever knows you belong to me.
Bring him back. He needs to come back for more seasons of AHS as a villain. I love it.
Now, this whole punishment by mutilation is heavily inspired. Throughout the history of time, cultures have used tattoos as a form of punishment, but also in the 1932 film, which we've talked about before, Freaks, this is another implication that we've seen in that film, and they bring it to this into this season of Freak Show. Also, later on, when we see the twins, you get to see Bette kind of with a makeover, and she goes into these blonde hair.
Blonde hair.
Yeah, and she says that she's resembling Eve Arden, but this is likely a reference to the real life Daisy and Violet Hilton, the two conjoined twins who were also featured in the 1932 film Freaks. So, as we said from the beginning of this season of breakdowns, that film Freaks was a heavily inspired what we see in the TV show here.
And speaking of the twins, Elsa takes this moment to shoot her shot, and she gives a note to Dot. Just, again, to try to separate the two, and she wants to see what's in Dot's head because she knows something's going on here. And I love that whole sequence with the black and white, and you just have one coming in, the shot. I love that whole thing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this sequence, the letter reading split screen effect with the black and white. Obviously when we see Sarah Paulson's characters framed up in this series, you can only in order to get one of them framed up, you got to put them either like camera left, camera right.
Yeah.
But to kind of have one of them as the reading the letter, and then you have Jessica Lange, kind of responding to the letter as well. I thought it was a really effective way to kind of show this communication going back and forth between the two, obviously on the down low, so that no one else can figure out what's going on. We learned that basically, Dot is just convinced that she wants the surgery, and that Elsa needs to track down the surgeon that can pull off such a surgery, because she dreams of a life without her sister.
Your secret is safe as long as I get what I want.
So this leads to Elsa talking to Stanley over dinner about her situation with the twins. So Stanley, because he's horrible, he's probably Satan, decides to tell her that, you know what, hey, I got a better idea. Instead of trying to find the doctor and spending money, why don't you let me take care of them and we can just, kill them? I don't know.
What an amazing TV producer, huh, Greg? He's just coming up with ideas to murder the twins.
All the best ideas.
Wow. Yeah, and the thing is that, this is obviously going to solve not only his own problem of getting some money and bringing a specimen to the museum, but it also solves Elsa's problem because she hates having them in the limelight and taking away from her.
It's a win-win. They're both horrible, and a good thing is that Ethel was listening in on that conversation, so she knows something weird's going on here.
Now, Greg, this is possibly the most horrific scene that we've seen this season of Freak Show. I'm talking about when Dell just crushes poor Ma Petite to death in his arms, just like hugging her so tenderly, and then just breaks her neck. I mean, this was horrible to watch.
Yes, and of course, Stanley is able to finally sell a body to the Morbidity Museum once and for all, and we see, there it is at the very end, Ma Petite in a jar at the museum.
Yeah, a horrible sight, and one that has been foreshadowed before with these fantasy flash forwards that Ma Petite would become one of the victims, but now it's for real, obviously, that she's one of the specimens in the museum. Dell is just a horrible human being at this point, irredeemable, killing poor Ma Petite. My question when this happened was, they already know that Dell attacked Amazon Eve like a few nights earlier.
Yeah.
Why isn't anyone else? And we know that Ethel wanted to kill him for even the attack on her. How was it so easy for him to get alone with Ma Petite a few nights later and kill her?
Yeah.
You'd think there'd be more people watching and kind of looking out for each other, knowing that some shady stuff is going on.
With that said, it's very likely that Stanley and Elsa are going to cover this up in the very next episode.
I've heard about managers who would kill for their clients. Looks like I found one.
All right, guys, that'll do it for this breakdown. But of course, we will be back next week for episode 8's breakdown. And I promise you, Greg, I will be wearing a onesie just like you.
Right on.
Okay.
All right. Everyone stay safe out there.
Stay safe. See you guys.
Bye-bye.